Funmilayo Ransome Kuti would sometimes be regarded as Fela's mother, but above that, she was a Nigerian educator, political campaigner, women's rights activist, and traditional aristocrat. In 1932, Ransome Kuti had helped establish the Abeokuta Ladies Club. The club at first wasn't political, but in 1946, the club was formally renamed the Abeokuta Women's Union, women with its focus on fighting unfair price controls and taxes imposed on market women. In May 1949, Ransome Kuti proposed the creation of the Nigerian Women's Union in order to better support women's rights and enfranchisement across the country. The AWU supported her proposal, and the organization subsequently became the Abeokuta branch of the NWU. Alongside her political work, Ransome Kuti began investing time and money to establish new schools throughout Abeokuta, a project that arose from the deep belief in the importance of education and literacy. A true Nigerian champion of feminism, equality, and education.
Just stand there teasing me. Now it's time to show and prove.
Advocate, norm breaker, fighter, mother, wife are some tags Aisha Yesufu might be known as, but she doesn't like labels. She's a Nigerian social political activist and a co-convener of the Bring Back Our Girls movement. And her voice has been very loud for the call for an end to bad governance. Aisha's story is one that breaks every box society has tried to put her in. From her education to her activism, she's an ardent fighter for those whose voices have been silenced in society. Aisha was on the list of 2020's BBC 100 Women, and she was also cited as the top 100 most influential Africans by Nigerian African magazine in 2020. On this International Women's Month special, we speak with Aisha Yesufu on her activism and her continuous fight for the girl child, woman, and Nigeria. My name is Balanle Olukoni, and this Rubbing Minds International Women's Day special, Lipton is raising a mug to Aisha Yesufu.
The Aisha Yesufu. It's such an honor to meet you in person, I have to say. Doing my research and just hearing about the story of your life, I want to go back to your childhood because I think it's very important that we understand where you're coming from and the obstacles that you had to go through to get here. Talk to us about growing up in Kano, and you said that you grew up in a ghetto.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and it's such a pleasure being here with you. For me, my childhood is it's something else. And a lot of people say to me, how do you get to do what you do? And I say to them, this is who I've always been. Before I come to when we were in the ghetto in Kano, at one time we were in Kaduna, and I did my nursery school there. My father had started school again. He was at the Kaduna Polytechnic. And one day I walked up to my dad, according to him, I can't remember this, and I said to him, if he's not going to take me to school, I will no longer go to school, because the neighbor that would normally drop me with his daughter, I say he was looking at me one kind, he was always angry when he was picking me up. So at the age of 4, I was already making demands, and I've always been that person. And when my father lost everything and we had to live in the ghetto, it was something that was so different from what I was used to. And in the ghetto, of course, we had no food to eat. We did a lot of fighting. And so today when people insult me, I always say to them, there's no kind of insult we didn't use then, because we had nothing. And growing up in the ghetto and just watching all my friends getting married, by the age of 11, I had no girlfriend. All of them they were all married off, and some of them married as young as 9 years. Yeah. And I always wanted to be somebody. And I refused to see the ghetto as that was my limit. I was someone who would read. I read a lot. And I wanted a life out of that ghetto. I wasn't working, and my mom was always like, who is going to marry you? You know the normal mentality. You can't do this whole housework. And I would say to them, I will get people to do it. I will get machine yam pounder and all of that. But the most important thing was the fact that I knew there was a life out of the ghetto that I was born into, and I was determined to get that life. And I wanted to ride a car. I wanted to be known. And I knew every woman that I saw then riding a car, they were all educated. And I wanted to be educated. I wanted to travel the whole world. Right. Even though my parents couldn't understand my dreams were so much bigger than the reality we had. So we had a situation whereby we weren't eating. There was no food to eat. Money tonight there were days we had absolutely nothing to eat. And here I was dreaming of traveling the world. But you know what? in 2014, my mom called me and she said to me, thank you for dreaming for the whole family, because we've gotten to a place where we'd never have thought we would be at.
So, you know, it's fascinating because you had multiple obstacles. You grew up in the North where, specifically in Kano, and it's a more conservative society, like you said, your friends were being married off by the age of 11. And you're also dealing with the issue of poverty. But you're telling yourself, I want to come out of it. Where did you even get that mindset? Do you think, was it a specific incident that happened where you realize you're like, I look around and I don't want to be my friends. I don't want to be married by the age of 11, 12. I want to do something outside of this.
I wouldn't know whether there's something specific, but I knew the books I read, because I was such an avid reader. I don't read now the way I used to before. I mean, if I see you with a book that I've never read before, I would have like goosebumps and I'll be shaking. So it was so for me, there was a whole world out there in terms of that determination that I was going to do something with my life, not just be in somebody's house. And I was extremely stubborn. Maybe those things that they call stubborn children, I was one of them. But there's an incident that happened. I think I was around maybe 5, 6, if I can remember, because I asked my dad recently. I think I was almost 79 or 80. My junior sister died. And when she was very sick, and my dad wasn't at home, and then everyone told my mom that it wasn't a sickness for hospital. And so they watched her, they were doing all sorts of herbs, burning different things, they wanted her to sneeze. And that little girl that I was the one that was watching. As we were sitting at that where and then she was lying on a woman's chest, lap. And I'll be the one to go under, and I was looking at her face to tell the others what was happening. And I kept telling them, you know, she's closing her eyes, her eyes are becoming white and all of that. And she died. And for me, that was the first time I watched somebody actually literally died. And somehow over the years, recently I've been thinking about that very event. And I think it was what sort of like changed me in a way where I got to a place where I do not fear anyone. I only respect. Even as a child, I was less than 10 when I said to myself, the worst thing any human being can do to me is to kill me, and that I'm going to die anyway. So that's not really the worst thing.
It's so fascinating, and it's also so powerful. I want to talk a little bit about advocacy and, you know, how you got into advocacy. You know, we're talking about Bring Back Our Girls and the tragedy that in so many ways is still living with us, and now it's become like a reoccurrence every week. How did you get into advocacy work?
So I think I've always been into advocacy work. Remember my demands at the age of 4.
Yeah.
That was actually advocating for myself, standing up to my dad. And I did that all the years. I remember when I turned 18, after I'd started university, the first letter that somebody wrote to me, my dad read it. And I said to my dad, you don't have any right to read my letter. I'm 18, I'm an adult, and it's my letter, it's my property. Anywhere I saw injustice, I never will look the other way. And so in 1992 was when I had my first protest, and I was in the university. That was my first day in the university, and I can't even remember what the protest was all about. But we had that, so that was as far back as 1992. Right. And so in school, all throughout from my primary school, secondary school, I was always someone who was vocal, always someone who would demand. One thing, by the way, I'm very respectful. I will obey all the rules that is there, but if you step out of the way, I'm going to be there. And let me tell you, there was a time that one of my teachers in Pratt Secondary School came into the classroom, a female, she's the only female teacher we had, and she said to me, Aisha Mohammed, because that's my maiden name, who is your boyfriend? And I looked at her, and I called her husband's name, and I said, that was my boyfriend. And she just turned, and she started writing on the wall. That was how I could just go, because I felt some of the teachers were actually doing that to our junior students. And we had heard about that, where they would come into the class and they would sort of like be asking them such questions. And I always wonder, why would you do that to students? And then she chose me of all the students in our class to do that too. And of course, for me, I stood up to her. But in case of national advocacy, for me, it came after my 40th birthday. I turned 40 on the 12th of December, 2013. Right. And I realized that I had become the problem of Nigeria. As a teenager, I hated Nigeria. I hated the injustice. I hated the corruption. I hated the poverty. I hated the fact that adults were doing nothing while our country was going this way. And then one day I was 40 and I realized that I had become the adult who is also doing nothing. And there were also children that were my age who are going through so much right now. And I said to myself, from now on, I'm going to focus on national issue. But before I focused on national issue, I had to work on something, and that was my financial independence. Remember, I grew up poor. When you're poor in Nigeria, you're faceless, nameless, and voiceless. You're seen as nothing. You're cancelled already. And I never wanted that in my life. So all through up until 40, I worked on my financial independence. I'm a businesswoman. I'm a trader. I buy and sell. And so on that 40th birthday, I said to myself, I'm going to give Nigeria the next 40 years of my life if God gives me another 40 years. And 4 months after, Chibok girls happened. And when that happened, I joined the protest. And Nigerians heard me loud and clear.
All right, you are watching the Rubbing Minds 1 month special, International Women's Month. And this, of course, is powered by Lipton. We'll be right back.
This is a Rubbing Minds special for International Women's Month, powered by Lipton.
Wanna get with you. Don't just stand there teasing me. Now it's time to show and prove.
You know, your courage is absolutely phenomenal because we're living in a time where you don't know what's going to happen. How many times have you been arrested?
None.
How many times have you been detained?
Once. And
Now, in that moment when there's, the police are detaining you and they're saying that you don't have a right to do this thing and you have a right to do it. And I can hear that it's a narrative where you have always said, no, I know my rights, I know who I am. You're a 4-year-old, you're growing up in a conservative community and you're telling your dad, you're taking me to school. That's something that I feel like it's divine in a way. You know, you don't learn that, it just is in you. Now, for people who are not naturally like that, there are a lot of Nigerians that are very docile. Yes, we're bold people, we're outgoing. You know, we like to act like bravados, but when push comes to shove, we have a fear of authority. And we're taught that if someone is older than you, you must be silent. Now that's changing, but I don't know if it's changing on ground. I know it's changing online. We saw a lot of movement and progress happen during NSAS. But what would you say to my generation, the generation that's younger than me, on fighting and pushing back on authority that is oppressing people?
So before I answer that question, I'll just talk about a little bit about many times that I've been at protests. You know, some people look at it and think arrest is not even that bad thing. I've for the last, I think, 4 or 5 years, myself and my husband already have an agreement. I'm like, if they arrest me, no problems, just leave me there. I'll be there. And then, of course, in terms of a lot of accounts, my business accounts, where I was the only sole signatory, I had to make him signatory because in case I'm arrested, so that my business is not affected. A number of times where we stand at that protest, there were so many protests that I went to that I never thought I was going to come back home. And so waiting there and just expecting that bullet to come in. I remember one, I think that was in February 2015, when we protested against the postponement of election at the INEC office. And one police officer said he was going to shoot us. I did a tweet and I said, look, if we die, guys, please continue this fight. So there's so many times you stand there and you're just expecting that bullet to come into you. On the 10th of October, when during the NSAS, when that picture that went viral, that was not even the most, for me, it wasn't even the most poignant moment. Right. It was when, after the whole of that event, and then we were just standing and the police started shooting and they threw the tear gas canister, everybody ran away. I refused to run away. And I raised my hand and I walked slowly and the police were shooting at me. And I could hear the bullets flying. I could see the tear gas canister. At that moment, I thought I was going to die, literally. And I said to God, I said, look, let it be one single shot and I'm gone. Because I didn't want any situation whereby I'll be on the floor in pain and some policemen would stand over me and, you know, be gloating. So I just walked. And I walked out of that place thinking, and up to this day, I don't know how I wasn't hit on that day. So there's so many of such moments where you just stand and you're giving up. But you said something that is so instructive, and that's the fact that a lot of people were brought up to not have the capacity to make demands. And for me, I'm calling on parents. I'm a parent. My first son is going to be 22 this year, and I brought them up to have a voice, to be able to make demands on me. I'm not one parent to say that my kids have to obey me. I told my children, if they have to respect me simply because I brought them to this world, then that means I'm not deserving of their respect. So a lot of people, the first tyrants that most people have faced are actually parents. So they've been used to, being told not to have a voice, being their rights being trampled on by their parents, by their teachers, by elders around them. And when they simply grow up, they replace government with these elders. And many people say to me they are afraid to die. But one of the things I want them to understand is that what we have in Nigeria today, it's not living. People are not living, we are merely surviving. And it is high time for us to actually have a life. And that at the end of the day, we will be the ones that will decide the way our nation will go. And as long as there's so many of us that come out, there isn't much that they can do. The only reason why the government is able to brutalize and and trample so many people's rights is because not enough of us come out when it matters the most. So they know that, okay, there are few people that they can marginalize, that they can do everything to and get away with it. But if we do not allow them to get away with it, they won't.
Now, I know that you and your husband have a special bond. There's no interview that you don't talk about him. So talk to me about, how supportive he's been in your journey and just doing life with you.
When you just say that, I just remembered him. He said, why are you always talking about me? Like, because I love you and I always talk about you. And my husband, oh my goodness, he's amazing. He's an amazing human being. He's so supportive. I call him the #1 feminist that I know. Yeah. In 1997, when we started going out together, he said to me, you need to be financially independent. You need to have your own money. And he has always been so supportive in my business. And I started my business in the year 2000. And the money I used for my first business, of course, he didn't have it. He had to even take loan in his office and everything. I was going to Dubai to buy things and bring it here. He's somebody who has given himself for me to thrive. And he's so happy when he sees me progressing, and he's always my cheerleader. He's my mentor. He's my everything.
That's amazing. That's beautiful. Even in my generation, I don't know how many men are like that. That's a special bond to have with someone. You said your husband is a feminist, so that means that you're a feminist, of course, as well. Would you consider yourself a feminist?
I don't do labels. But so everything that a feminist represents, I do that. But one thing with me. When I say I don't do labels, yes. I absolutely mean it in the way that because people now begin to box you towards an expectation. Oh, you said you're a feminist, but everything that feminism represents, I do too.
Earlier you talked a lot about watching your peers and young girls being married off at a very early age, and I've seen that you talk a lot to the people in the North about making sure that they're fighting and they're trying to progress. The way the rest of the world is, where do you think the girl child currently stands when it comes to the northern parts of Nigeria?
The girl child currently doesn't stand at where she's supposed to be. And to a good extent. So in the North, there's something about the North that a lot of people don't understand. There's almost like an invisible caste system between the have and the have-not. So the Telekawas and the Atajire, sort of. And they don't sort of cross. They don't cross. So I grew up, and then I realized that there was a North that I knew about that a lot of people that I meet today don't even know anything about, because they are the haves. They have and the elite, so they don't know what's going on the other side. Unlike in the South, where people break class, your parents could be poor, and then they send you to school. They do everything, you get there, and so the ones on the elites. Yeah, the women have a bit of rights and all of that, but the other one they are trampled upon. But ironically, the Northern woman is liberated in a whole lot of ways that the Southern woman isn't. That is, yes, many people don't get that. For example, when it comes to marriage, and they are not going to stay in any marriage if they don't want to. That's why you say the divorce rate.
Divorce rates are higher there.
I mean, when I was growing up and a Northern man would beat his wife, that's the end of that marriage. But unlike my own aunties, my own mothers, aunties, and all of that from the southern part, they would tolerate that. They would stay in the marriage. They never did. They didn't want to tolerate that. And then, of course, an older woman would marry a younger man without batting an eye, which is impossible for women on the other side.
Cougar.
Exactly. I grew I've seen a lot of, women, they will marry in their 60s, will actually marry young men in their 20s. And there was nothing wrong in it. And whether they were divorced or they were widowed, they always remarried, which was unlike the other side. And also in the terms of Islamic, in terms of having wealth, a good number of them had their own wealth. They had because it's allowed in Islam. A woman controls her own money. In Islam, the money of a woman is hers. The one of the husband is ours. Okay. So it's everyone's own. So they had a bit of that, but then there's also the part of where they're not allowed to come out. You find that some of them, even when you're working, you're stopped from working. When you're doing business, you're stopped from doing business. And that, I have said a lot of time, has led to the high number of children you find on the streets. Because in actual sense, it's women that take care of their children. Even in the southern part of the country, it's women that are struggling. You see the woman selling ugu, selling pepper to ensure that her child goes on to get education. The man, the moment he loses his white-collar job, he will sit at home. He will no longer look for work. He's the woman that will go out and put bread on her head to hawk and do akara and do all sorts of things to ensure that her children get into school. But in the northern part of the country, you find that most of them, the moment they get married, they are put in further. They are not allowed to work. They are not allowed to go and do business. And so they can't do anything. And then those children, then if they had children from other marriages or something, the man, after a while, divorced them, then they're forced to marry again. The kids are left, and you see all the kids roaming on the street. And I say, if more women were given that empowerment, allowed to own their wealth and work, there will be less children on the streets.
Now, I think there's a huge divide between the North and the South, and I think I just want to say that it's very important that we have people like you advocating and bridging the gap, because I've learned a lot through this conversation and the things that you've said in the past. Before we wrap up, I want to find out, what do you choose to challenge? That's the theme for International Women's Month. What are you choosing to challenge?
What I choose to challenge is the little voices that were planted in all our heads as little girls. To challenge that voice that says to you that you cannot be whoever it is that you want to be. Challenge that voice that says to you that you have to succumb to what the society says. Challenge that voice that says to you that you are not enough until you have somebody. Challenge that voice that says to you somebody has to look at you either as a mother, a wife, a sister, a cousin, a niece, an auntie, and not just as a human being, and feel that you're deserving of that respect. So for me, I would say, let every one of us look inward, and that little voice that it keeps telling us that we cannot do it, it is time to not only challenge it, but to shatter it and ensure that we give ourselves the freedom to be who we want to be on this earth, because the world is waiting for the women to arise and take it to the glorious place that it's supposed to be. Woo! To the Nigerian woman, you're great, you're amazing, you're fantastic. You stand on irrespective of what is thrown at you. The forces that come at you, yet you never give up. I want to tell you that this is the International Women's Month. It's our month. You know what? Now you get this one. May you continue the carry and the go. No even look and see where anybody they talk. Just keep going. And this is for you. Let's get going. They are waiting for us. It's time for us to show them that indeed. Now we get them.
This is a Rubbing Minds special for International Women's Month, powered by Lipton.